Good morning, entrepreneurs. You are tuned in to the Non-Corporate Network, the worldwide leader in entrepreneurship. My name is Chaz Vandemotter.
I am Dustin Trout.
And this is Entreprenews. We are stoked to have you with us today. Whole purpose of the show is to keep you woke. You know, there's a lot of sus business news out there. And so our goal is to really bring you guys the real hard truth, the top 6 trending small business headlines. Dustin and I will debate these stories for 3 minutes apiece, give you some quick consumable knowledge, keep you woke on what's going on in the world. Dustin, anything you want to add before we jump right into it?
That was well articulated, Chaz.
Thank
Much
you.
more articulated than your arguments, which we'll get into here in a second. But if you're looking to try and find where we're at, anywhere that you consume content, you can find us. Just search Entreprenews, whether it be on YouTube, Facebook, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. The list goes on. Wherever and however you consume content, search for us and subscribe. Would appreciate it.
I hate to tell you guys, it's not free to listen today. You got to tell a business owner about us. You got to tell an entrepreneur about us. We want to keep them woke too. But without further ado, let's dive right in to our first story. Uber and Lyft drivers aren't employees after all. We've been following this story quite a bit here in Entreprenews. California voted on Prop 22. It was the most expensive ballot measure in California history. $200 million campaign in support of the measure. This is something that, like I said, we've been following for a while. The big debate is, are gig economy workers considered employees? Are they warranted health benefits and W-4s, or should they be 1099s? And, this goes back to Uber and Lyft were threatening to leave California altogether or drastically cut back service, raise the prices of the fares. It would have dropped their workforce from about 1.4 million down to about 280,000 drivers. And so, a lot of implications would have happened had this not, had this been a different result, but ballot was passed 58%. So not a super close race, but Dustin, what are your thoughts on how this is all shaken out on Prop 22?
I love it. I think that relationship should be decided between employee and employer. I think really the only one that stood to gain was the state of California with the additional taxes, payroll taxes and whatnot. And so, I know they're in a pretty large deficit. So it's, trying to make money somehow. And I don't think you should force, titles on a relationship. And so I'm excited to see that it happened. I think the biggest argument for it was that, you're forcing people to be a contractor when they want benefits and all that. And it's like, well, it's an open market. There are plenty other types of work like this where you can be a contractor. And if you don't like what the employer is laying out, then you go find a different place to work. And so not one to force anything from a business and employer relationship type of thing. So I like it, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah. California has set a precedence time and time again, right? We were talking about data privacy and disclosing to users if the data is being used to monetize and shared with other companies. And so, just another example of California setting the precedence here. And I think, to be honest, I think they set the right precedence, right? This is going to be something that is going to continue to be a topic of discussion. These are not the only companies that have gig workers. You've got DoorDash, you've got Instacart, you've got a lot of large companies that are growing and growing. And so, I think that this had to be set as a precedence, and we'll see where it goes from here. But I think it, like you said, it empowers the worker to make the decision instead of being kind of their hand is forced into, well, if you want to do some part-time work, that's too bad for you. You got to be a full-time W-4 nothing. And so, I think it's going to help a lot of people for sure.
One thing that sticks out though is the $200 million spent to campaign this. It's like, man, it'd be interesting to see how much is spent just during this time between presidential and state propositions.
150
and all that.
million came from Uber and Lyft too.
I know. It's what good can be done in the world if you combine all the money that was spent campaigning and everything. And, it could employ a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the Uber and Lyft are probably looking at this going, well worth $150 million to get this decision. So, power to them, power to 22 and all the people that voted on that one. And we'll see kind of where the gig economy future goes from here. Getting into our next story. Walmart ends contract with robotics company, opts for human workers. This is kind of counterintuitive to some of the stuff that we've reported on over the last few months. Walmart has cut ties with Bossa Nova Robotics, which made robots that scan shelves for inventory. They actually had a test store up in off of Raintree in my neck of the woods where, yeah, literally robots were rolling around and scanning the shelves with cameras, and then it would notify the back end warehouse managers to go and bring products out once the shelves were empty. And, you know, a novel idea, but Dustin, what do you think the reasoning is behind, canceling this relationship? And what does this say about, the future of technology and automating human labor?
I'm sure there are more kinks than it was bringing value. I mean, knowing Walmart, they're pretty profit focused, and so I don't think this is done in trying to help humankind or mankind. I think it's just they need to go back to the drawing board and maybe help. But I do think that they might have cut back too early if it was the decision to try and, we see that this is going to impact humanity. It's going to take jobs. That's why we don't want to move forward. I think that was done too quickly. I think we will get to that point where mankind is going to rely too heavily on robots, and it's going to lose jobs and all of that. And I mean, we are selfish human beings. We're a selfish species. So then we'll revert back to, away from robots, and the market and all that will determine that fine balance of how robots and humans interact. But I think that there's probably some things that were happening where it created more liabilities than efficiencies. And so definitely a step back. But if it is that, there's a lot to learn and a lot they're going to the drawing board with. And I'm sure that they'll evolve what all this is. But I mean, what do you think? Is this for humanity or, I mean,
it's definitely a name of profit. Like you said, I think it probably had something to do with, hey, this just wasn't working properly or was causing more work than it was meant to. And so they pull the plug on it and go, let's just go back to normal and make sure that we're reducing the errors. I also look at this and go, what's the difference between what's happening there with those robots that they have in consumer facing retail locations like Walmart compared to what's happening at the warehouses and Amazon where they're kind of shipping products? I mean, they got 50 forklifts that are all running around automated, no people are touching them, and it's pulling product. And so it's like, there are much more robust systems on the back end of these kind of warehouse management products. And so I think that part of it is probably the stigma of being in a retail location where the robot's rolling around past you and you're dodging it to get what you need. And so it's like, I think that's probably another part of it is just consumer adoption and the stigma there.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. A lot of what these robots are used for and back in warehouses where you don't have people walking the aisles. And I think it's a big liability issue where you have, little Johnny walking around and run from his parents.
Run over or something.
Yeah, the robot doesn't see it and boom, you get run over. Now we got, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit on our hands, all to try and save, a couple hours at $15 an hour. I think, it kind of opened up some eyes in terms of liability that we're opened up to. And I think it's just they got to discuss how to get around that.
I'm still bullish on, repetition and automation taking over those jobs. But, this is, interesting to see what's happening there. Getting into our next story, Arizona voters approve Prop 207, making recreational marijuana legal in the state. 207 would legalize the possession of as much as an ounce of marijuana for adults 21 and older. It would set up a licensing system for retail sales of the drug, as well as, allow for more dispensaries. You can have plants. It also, helps with the incarceration. Previously convicted marijuana crimes, such as felony charges for possession, are going to be expunged. And so, Dustin, what do you think is going to have the biggest impact on Arizona? I mean, there's a multifaceted kind of, outcomes of this. But what do you think is going to have the biggest impact on Arizona?
And the biggest impact will be just, the revenue it's going to drive. I think, the voters spoke. It's a majority of people that want it. And I think, it'll be interesting to see how much revenue it drives from taxing. I think there's 16% tax that'll be incorporated. And so it goes to a general fund, I believe. But, between bringing on more taxes and like you said, it's going to have a impact on the incarceration rate. We have less people going to jail and taxpayer dollars paying for that. Yep. Now we're having more revenue while driving down costs. I mean, if you look at it at a business perspective, that's ultimately more profitable as a business. So I think it'll be more profitable as a state for sure. And I think, it's going to create jobs and whatnot. And there's other states that have done it. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can see some of those successes. I think Colorado's driven $300 million a year in extra taxes. I think other states are seeing a lot of good. And crime isn't going up, but I don't think there are as many negative impacts. But I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Washington is over 300 million, California about 300 million, Colorado is like 265 million. I mean, these are big numbers, right? And they're things that have caused really dynamic changes in how those states are run and how they use that money to help with education and other things. And so I think that, outside of that, I look at this as from an incarceration standpoint too. Like, it's great. I think that this has been something where, everyone has opinions about this, but at the end of the day, incarcerating people and kind of setting their trajectory of their life with a ceiling on it because of a mistake that they made in possessing this, I think it's going to probably save some money and really kind of help put some people back to work. Hopefully, I mean, like you said, the jobs are going to be created, business is going to be created, and so a lot of opportunity here.
Well, it'll be interesting though. Like my parents are in Colorado, and they said that when it got passed and everything, tourism exploded. I mean, you got surrounding states where it's illegal. Obviously, you're not supposed to buy it, go across state lines and all that. But I mean, I'm sure that that's happening. But ultimately, it's going to probably create more people coming here from Texas, maybe Utah. The surrounding states. So yeah. I mean, the article that we had last episode that talked about revenue from tourism down. I mean, this might have a different impact on it. Don't want a ton of people coming here buying and then going across state lines and doing all that. But I think.
We're gonna be flipping big time here. I mean, you think about 208 getting passed, you think about 207 getting passed. I mean, we're gonna have a lot of tax revenue coming in Arizona, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of what we do with that money because I think this is gonna make a big impact.
Yep.
Who else is making a big impact on our community is State 48. They've been amazing partners. They powered this podcast, and we just appreciate that we've got a great business to look up to here in Arizona that really does things not as much profit focused as they do just impact focused, and they bring a lot of awareness to great causes. Dustin, anything you want to mention about State 48, what they do?
Yeah, clothing for all, inspired by Arizona. They're doing a lot, making you look good, but also having a positive impact on the community with all their nonprofit partnerships. And so, they're just doing a lot. Make sure you check them out, state48.com. So going into our next story, America's malls are under pressure. CBL and Pennsylvania REIT filed for bankruptcy. And so these are two mall owners over in Pennsylvania that have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust is the largest mall owner in Philadelphia. Malls have been pressured by the coronavirus pandemic, with their tenants not paying for rent, dozens of retailers and restaurants filing for bankruptcy protection. They just don't have the rent coming in to pay for the space. Their whole goal is to kind of restructure what's going on, and after filing for bankruptcy is ask for an additional $150 million to kind of revamp the malls and make it a different type of experience. And so, Chaz, what are your thoughts? Is this the end of malls as we see it in America? Are they going to be turned into something else? And additionally, is giving $150 million to someone that just filed bankruptcy a smart move?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, a couple of thoughts here. One is that this was already a trend before COVID. There's just an exodus of in-person retail that's happening right now with e-commerce growing. And so we've already been seeing a phase change where malls are being repurposed into office space, co-working spaces, even here in Arizona. And so not super surprising that amid COVID on top of that trend kind of overarching that the malls would be struggling. What I will say is that two things. One, they're still in prime real estate locations. So it'd be a shame, especially with the, how they've built these malls, like to completely wipe them. I think that maybe repurposing them into having, some residential housing in there, not residential, but like, your apartment housing in there, maybe having a school in there, maybe having co-working and restaurants. I think you can repurpose these malls to be focused less on specifically retail, kind of diversify a little bit so that there's more reasons than I need to go inside and buy something, because the retail experience now has kind of gotten switched on its head. It makes it a little more obtrusive to go to a mall and buy something. The other thing is that, a lot of these states are states that have stayed closed longer. And so that probably doesn't help with, people wanting to go out and shop.
Bring up a lot of good points. I mean, if you were to combine it into some type of retail, residential, and all this, I think that's where there'd be a lot of success seen. But, you'd have to rezone everything. And that's something that I just thought of is, it is retail right now. You'd have to rezone it for residential, which then it goes up for vote to the public. So I think there's a lot of hoops to jump through to kind of change what the mall is used for, if it's going to be used for something outside a real estate space. But I think, luxury living, I think that'd be sweet. I mean, you live, your house is the old JC Penney's or whatever it may be. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, I think, I think it'll have to come down to zoning. I don't know what the laws are with zoning, but I worry that if you can't pass anything, we might start looking like Japan, where you have, or I can't remember what country, China, where you have, tons of cities where no one's living there because you can't do anything with the buildings.
Too expensive, not enough businesses in there, not enough market penetration. Yeah. No, I think, malls are kind of a place where people come together as a community. So we definitely don't want to see those just go. But I think, maybe diversifying outside of retail. Yep.
Let's go on to our next story. So U.S. private payroll growth slows in October. So overall hiring has slowed down during a time when usually hiring is ramping up. Q4, you got holiday season. Usually it's a huge influx of hiring, but it is starting to slow down compared to previous months. A few things that are attributing to this are increased cases of COVID across the country, lack of stimulus, and a lot of people are saying that the election are kind of causing this, and really the election because there's quite a few business owners that are holding off on big decisions until after the elections. They know what to do financially or how their tax liability is going to look like. And so, yeah, I think a culmination of a couple different things are kind of causing this. Yeah. Overall, payrolls did increase by about 365,000 last month. That did miss expectations. The expectations were about 650,000. So, I mean, almost cut in half. And so, Chaz, is this shedding light onto our the reality of our current economy, or is this going to rebound after the election?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it will rebound a little bit after the election. I wouldn't say that I'm riding the train of it's going to be better than ever post-election. I think it's a reflection of this kind of constriction of budget as it relates to COVID, and now kind of refining process, becoming more lean as an organization, pivoting. All these businesses business is pivoting, Dustin. And so, you see a lot of these pivots, you see a lot of this downsizing, you see a lot of this, let's add other kind of technical products to eliminate the need for additional workforce. And so I think that this kind of culmination of the constricted budget and really focusing more on expenses and going, how can we avoid hiring two people and only hire one person, but equip them with tools to be as productive as two people? And you start to see a lot more of those conversations when you don't have as much cash flow, right? And so I think that's probably, that's my hypothesis as it relates to, why we're probably seeing a little bit of this.
Yeah, I think we'll see an influx of spending right after the election. And then with that, it's going to create some jobs. And I think it boils down to business owners are waiting to make hiring decisions, but also consumers are kind of waiting to see what stimulus gets brought to the market after the election. I know Trump said that he was going to bring something. Biden said he's going to bring something. So no matter who wins, it sounds like there's going to be a stimulus package that's going to get into the taxpayers' hands. And from that, I think people, no one likes uncertainty. And I think not knowing who the president is causes that. And so once we can get past it, stimulus gets passed, I think it'll create an influx of spending again, like we saw right after that $1,200 was sent out to everyone. And once you got people spending, you got to, that demand is there. You're going to have to fulfill on those orders and whatnot. And so, I think it's, during the election, there's always uncertainty, but, coupled with a global pandemic, I think is the root of all this. Nonetheless, 365,000 jobs is still a good chunk of jobs that were added.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Awesome. So going into our last story, bringing it back here to Arizona, Arizona allocates $7 million to help renters and landlords during the pandemic. Doug Ducey has allocated $7 million from the state's emergency fund to help renters and property owners struggling financially during the COVID pandemic. The distribution includes $5 million going to landlords to help with maintenance and float tenants who can't make rent, while the other $2 million is going to about 5,500 Phoenix residents that have applied for assistance through the Arizona Department of Housing Rental Eviction Assistance Program. It's a long one. And so really it's split up, mainly going to landlords. And all that being said, Arizona does have a moratorium on evictions that lasts through Saturday, but there's still a federal moratorium that lasts through the end of the year. All this being said, I mean, landlords are getting a big chunk of that money. I mean, should it be more going to tenants, or is this the right move?
I mean, being as sensitive as I can, I would still say it's probably the right move. I mean, the people that are in charge of being the landlords are not getting paid. It's benefiting the tenants that they don't have to pay, and these moratoriums exist. And so it's almost like, you either give the money to the tenants and say, go pay your rent, which, how many people out of 100 do you think are going to do that? Or you just give it directly to the landlord and go, we're paying your rent for you. So I think it still benefits the tenant by doing this. But, at the end of the day, we think about landlords and the property taxes and different ways that they make money and pay their taxes. I mean, especially the property tax, I mean, that goes straight to, public service and firefighters and everything else. And so it's like, we need those bills to get paid. And when landlords aren't getting paid, them struggling to pay their bill, it just becomes this kind of bigger and bigger bubble that we're generating. So, all I got to say is, hey, 207 coming around the corner. And, even if conservatively we do like 150 million to 200 million in tax revenue, like, thinking about like 7 million is a big deal now. That's going to be a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things when we get a few more of these programs going, 207, 208. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I'm usually on the side of give it to the tenants, because they're going to go out and spend it. And, it's going to create a velocity of spending, which then creates jobs, and then landlords get paid.
GDP.
But I think to your point, it's, I hate to say it, but there's going to be a lot of people that are like, well, if I have a moratorium through the end of the year, I'm going to go 2 months without paying the landlord. And then if they can't pay it, and then overall gets foreclosed on, we have a crash. There's
been so much fraud.
Commercial real estate. I mean, yeah, we brought it up. How much fraud was it that, in unemployment, it was almost, I mean,
it was like over $250 million, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think this takes the liability of fraud out of the picture. I think landlords have too much, on their plate, and too many hoops they have to jump through to where they couldn't just go frivolously spend it and not pay on their buildings and stuff. So I think, good move.
Yeah. Well, was that the last one?
That was the last one.
Oh, it was
time flies when you're having fun.
Cruising through them today. I think a lot of this stuff's interesting. I mean, got to tip my hat to, Uber and Lyft and the Prop 22. I mean, it's not an easy thing to, go to bat against, somebody like the state of California, but they've done so successfully. And I think that sets just a huge precedence as it relates to the gig economy moving forward, to SaaS companies that have contracted employees. There's so many dual-sided marketplaces coming out, Dustin, that, this is going to stretch far and wide past Uber and Lyft. So, huge decision there.
Yeah, no, my favorite and most interesting is the Walmart and robot situation. I don't think that they're trying to save humankind. I think there are some issues there. Yeah. So excited to see what they can think through. Perfect.
Walmart Plus, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see that balance between robots and humans.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for being with us, whether you're watching on Facebook or listening to the podcast, driving to work, whatever it may be. We appreciate you. Again, it's not free. I'm sorry. You got to tell an entrepreneur about us. You got to tell a business owner about us. We'd love it if you subscribe to stay connected. Reach out to us if there's something you want to bring to life or a story you want us to debate. You can find us, like Dustin said, across pretty much anywhere you search. If you type in Entreprenews, you're going to find us there. But Dustin, where are they watching? What's the tagline? You want to hit that sign off for me this go around?
I don't know it. I don't know it. You usually lead it, man. You lead the charge.
Thank you guys for watching the Non-Corporate Network, the worldwide leader in entrepreneurship. This has been Entreprenews. Give them something, Dustin. Give the people something here.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys. What day is it? Wednesday. We'll see you guys Friday.
Blair's Day.
Yeah. Your sign on and sign off are better than your arguments, and I have the arguments.
We have to get some scoring going on here,
so,
man. Okay.
To each their own.
See you guys Friday.